What's up, Grace Church? Scott here, and it is the week of October 9th, and I want to welcome you to the weekly. This week, I want to not only discuss what we talked about from Mark 9 from Sunday, but I want to personalize it a bit and learn how we can use this for our faith and apply it to our lives. So just as a refresher, we read Mark 9 verses 14 to 29. And this is, if you remember, just after Jesus, Peter, James, and John come down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and they go back into town, and they come down from the mountain, they come back into town, and they meet up with the rest of the disciples. And so they walk into drama, as we talked about on Sunday. They found the other 9, and they walked into some drama. The other 9 disciples, they're arguing with the scribes, these religious leaders, the keepers of the law, and they're arguing with them for a specific reason. It looks like the disciples could not cast out an evil spirit from a young boy. And so they're arguing, and Jesus wants an explanation of why. He's told why. And the father of the young boy comes and says, I wanted you to heal my son, but that your disciples couldn't heal my son. And Jesus in this moment is so interesting how he gets annoyed, not of the failure of the disciples, but the lack of faith of the disciples. And then there's this interesting moment between the Father and Jesus. And the Father, he asks for help and for Jesus to cast out the spirit from the Son. But he says something that's interesting. He says something that questions Jesus. He says, if you can. And he says this, and then Jesus immediately calls him out, and he confronts the doubt of the Father. And so the Father responds with the statement, and you'll remember this. So he says, I believe, help my unbelief. Such a pivotal statement and a confession that we should have in our lives. And then at the end of it, when the disciples and Jesus are back, they're indoors, they kind of retreat back into a home. The disciples ask Jesus, like, why couldn't we perform this miracle? And if you remember in Mark 6, they were able to do miracles like this, healings and casting out demons when they were sent out 2 by 2. But in this moment, they weren't. And Jesus says something that, and clearly he was frustrated, but he says something that is so important. He says, this can only be accomplished through prayer. And so what do we do with this? And what is the link between our faith and our lack of faith in prayer? And on Sunday, I talked a lot about this, but what I want to present to you today and invite you into is that not only is our faith important, but I believe that our lack of faith, there's an opportunity there. It's an opportunity to see our need for Jesus, to surrender, to be dependent upon him, to trust him, to submit, to obey, and then to walk in faith. I think actually our doubts and our fears and our lack of faith and our unbelief, as the Father says, is part of the Christian life, and it's part of the ebb and flow of living as a disciple and follower of Jesus. But it is a life marked with constant prayer, independence, and faithfulness. So go through these discussion questions, and I really want you to get honest with your house church, with yourself. Where is your prayer life at? How often are you praying, and how does that inform your faith in Jesus? And then just get really vulnerable and okay with bringing your lack of faith with your house church, with your huddle if you're in one, with your discipleship and the people in our faith community here at Grace, but especially with the Lord. Bring your doubts, your unbelief to God, because he's not afraid of it. He can handle it, and bring that, just see what he does.